And we're going to be spending a little bit of time talking about the book Magical Meetings that's going to be launched on March 1st. And the book is organized into three sections: before the meeting, during the meeting, after the meeting. And these are very critical elements. I think often people think about, well, we got to make the stuff in the meeting really great. But there's a lot of stuff we do before the meeting to impact how it works, and it's more than just making an agenda. And we even talk about how most agendas are wrong. And so it's we're really excited about this. And tonight we're gonna just go a little bit deeper into a few pieces of each one. And I'm gonna talk about before the meeting, and then we're going to workshop the during and the after the meeting. So let's take a look. So before the meeting, I think the most critical thing we need to ask ourselves is, do we actually need a meeting? And I've shared in the mural our do we need this meeting test. And so let me just cruise over really quickly to the mural, and I'll just show you. We had this test we have in the book. And so I'm not going to read this out necessarily, but this is a really great set of questions to ask yourself before any meeting to decide if we should even have it. And we call this, should we even have this meeting test? Also, it's really helpful to think about the category of meeting that you're having. So whether it's informative, explorative, generative, or decisive. And a lot of times workshops and higher level meetings will be a combination of these things. But one thing to note, if it's purely informative, we need to be really, really careful. And I think a lot of times people will talk about, should that meeting have been an email, which is, it's solid advice to think about. But if we're feeling really strongly that this meeting is informative, but we're really afraid to cancel it or afraid to get rid of it, that's an opportunity to dive a bit deeper into what's driving that. Why do we feel like we need this informative meeting? Is there really no way to successfully asynchronously communicate this stuff? And perhaps it's about the fact that we're really wanting to explore this together. And so maybe we can design the meeting to be more inclusive or more supportive of that goal, to be more to explore and get reactions from folks. And so this is comes to one of our meeting mantras: no purpose, no meeting. And I think that at the end of the day, so many meetings have outlived their usefulness because we've gotten the cadence of doing them. We're every week it's just ritual. And if we get really crisp around the why we're meeting and make sure it's well communicated, then we can make better decisions on what we do in the meeting, how we're structured, and if we should even still have it. The other thing that is really critical to understand here is, even though the purpose is clear to you, it doesn't necessarily mean it's clear to everyone else. And so that's also a really important thing to think about before the meeting. Have we clearly communicated the purpose? And that could be through how we name the meeting, how it shows up on our calendars, how we talk about it, and then even starting the meeting off with an intention check, like, why are we here? To really make sure that purpose is well understood, and that there's that the nuance is there, and we can support everyone and where they're at. So again, I think I shared this on the mural, but really think about these meeting types and really honor what we're doing. And in fact, this one here, I really want to underscore these decisive meetings, right? Because this really gets us into trouble when we have a meeting that is explorative or generative, and we have no plan of it being decisive, but we have people in the room that think it's going to be decisive, or vice versa. So making it really, really clear around that intent will make sure everyone has a much more enjoyable experience, and they don't walk away feeling dejected or feeling like they were misinformed, or that things went sideways. So again, I shared this test that you saw in the mural. So you all should have that mural link, and you can access it anytime you want. I highly recommend you using this as a nice way to revisit any meetings that you currently do, especially on a regular basis. And ultimately what I want to just really drive home is to bring more intention into your meetings. So thinking about the types of meetings that you have, and also thinking about the purpose that you bring and making sure that's clearly communicated, whether this is a workshop or whether this is just a weekly status meeting. And if it's a status meeting, then like, aren't there status tools or things that could potentially be used? What is it? Is it really that we want to bring the team together to get them more connected? If so, like, let's honor that purpose and be really, really clear about it. And then we can design into that need versus just saying, oh, it's a status update. And then designing toward a status that no one really cares about, but they go because they feel like they're supposed to, and also because they are getting that connection. Well, imagine if we focused on that connection instead. So whatever it is, let's just bring that intention into the meetings.
Douglas,
So
can I just ask you a question? Are there any tips
course,
or anything? Are there any tips or anything like that in regards to ensuring that there's that clarity and intent prior to the meeting, especially like now, as people have them in flight? Is there anything you guys do or recommend?
Yeah, for sure. And some of the stuff we talk about in the book would be big fans of the meeting before the meeting. So interviewing your participants, co-creating the agenda with them. All these things help make that intention and that purpose more clear. Even you'd be surprised how much even stopping to ask yourself, because it often doesn't happen, and just taking that step to be reflective on, well, why is it that we have this meeting every week? What's the intent? And also, if we look at outcomes, right? These are typically nouns, deliverables, things. It's not necessarily the why. At a higher level, at a more strategic level, I'd probably compare it to, you know, objectives versus mission or vision, right? The mission and the vision drives us, but the objectives are going to be these things that we met, the things we're trying to accomplish, the ways we're going to get there. And so I think a lot of times people, when they're thinking about agendas or thinking about how to plan for their meetings, can get really stuck on the tactics, the topics, the list of things they want to cover, or the things they want to generate. We want to generate this document, and that's really good. We want to make sure that we're really clear on that, but the why can really drive us and really motivate us. So if at all, if we can articulate that, really helpful. And just even asking yourself why, the Simon Sinek kind of approach can be really powerful. So let's take a look at during the meeting. And we want to really think about the stuff that we want to get done in the meetings, because if our calendar is just full of meetings, just like back to back, we're just slammed, then where's the room to do the work? We've heard this so much, especially since COVID. It seems like it's just with all the Zoom meetings, and it's just fascinating that I hear more and more people complaining about just not having room in their schedules. Maybe because of the impromptu connections aren't happening, and so they're trying to replace that serendipity with more scheduled meetings. But whatever it is that's causing it at the core, people are feeling more and more slammed, and we just hear constantly, I have so many meetings, how can I get the work done? And our biggest piece of advice is to do the work in the meeting. And like, people always, like, one of the typical pieces of advice for meetings is like, have an agenda and walk away with action items. And I'm like, well, okay, that's like table stakes. If you don't know what you're going to talk about, and you don't walk out with some understanding of what's next, then like you're really bad off. Like, you're just in a circus. It's like a goat rodeo. And what I'm encouraging people to do is, like, instead of waiting till the end of the meeting and say, okay, you go do this, you do this, you do this, why don't we come together and do the work in the meeting? And if you've been tuning in the future now, and you're in this community at all, you're probably really familiar with prototypes. And I'll tell you, prototypes are the answer. Prototypes allow us to do the work in the meeting. if we bring prototypes to the meeting, we can react to prototypes, we can critique them together, we can build prototypes together in meetings. And remember that prototypes can take on all sorts of forms. They don't have to be of some nature or some structure. As long as we are forming our hypothesis around what we want and where we want to get, we can build a prototype to simulate that future and learn from it. And so even if we're, wanting to think about develop our pitch for our fundraising campaign, then we can build that rough draft. What does that arc look like? What are the basics? What are the basic things we want to communicate? Are there data points we already have that we can bring together? And then the action items become really, really clear. We got a high sense of ownership because everyone's been contributing. If anything, it's just a matter of documenting. The Kanban just kind of comes together really quickly rather than trying to solicit the stuff at the end. It's kind of already somewhat known. So again, prototypes transform meetings. So that's we cover a lot of in the meeting stuff in the book, different facilitation techniques and modalities, different ways to show up as a participant and how you can manipulate the meeting, influence the meeting is probably a better word, as a participant, and be a friend of the facilitator. In fact, we love to say that there's no such thing as bad meetings, it's just bad facilitators. And if you are putting a meeting on someone's calendar, whether you think of yourself as a facilitator or not, you are the facilitator. And if you're not thinking of yourself as a facilitator, or you're not taking the job seriously, or you're not walking in with a lot of intention, then it's probably not going to be a great meeting. And so this is kind of the meat of the stuff we're talking about in Do the Work in the Meeting. In the meeting influence. And prototypes, I think, are the most powerful thing to think about. Like if you bring prototypes to the meeting, use prototypes during the meeting. So I'd love to just show different kinds of prototypes. So like they can be kind of design sprint style prototypes where we're kind of using Figma or InVision or some other tool to simulate a mobile device. Even Session Lab to prototype some event or some schedule that we're working on. If that's what we're trying to get to ultimately, why not just pull the tool up and let's start working there? One of my favorite stories of a prototype is a 2-pound weight. So we had a client that was making electronic test equipment, and they had to build a new piece of equipment, and the engineer said, well, we could totally do this using stuff we already have. And long story short, they thought this thing was going to be 2 pounds, and then the client said, oh, this sounds reasonable. But then once they took it out in situ and started using it, they had to measure the canopy of trees. They were moving this thing up and down a bunch, and they're like, oh wow, I'm like, after 100 shoulder presses, this 2 pounds is starting to get heavy. And so they reimagined it, they redesigned it with the sensor that was much more lightweight in the main unit, like a belt pack. But the point is, like, prototypes can take on all sorts of forms. And if we think about the prototyping mindset in our meetings, very, very powerful way to make them way more experiential, make them much more effective. So, all right, again, if we make the meetings inclusive through prototypes or other means, we can, oh wow, there's a poll that just popped up in front of my view. We can create more durable decisions. If our goal is to create decisions, if it's a decisive meeting, then being inclusive will create those phenomenons. So we have a mantra at Voltage Control. They got reworded in the release because people felt like others outside of Voltage Control wouldn't understand it. But I tell everyone, all meetings are optional. If you don't think that you're going to benefit from attending, or that you won't benefit others by attending, you should not attend. but use some etiquette, right? Let folks know you're not coming. I think often people their calendars get crop dusted with meetings, and they feel inclined like they have to do it. Well, taking a moment to think about how to show up in meetings and how we ask others to show up and how we co-create them with our team, really powerful. And even this little Take 5 method can be a surprisingly powerful way to create a really loose, simple prototype, a collage And you can just kind of get a sample of a poll of where people are at. It's really, really cool. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about after the meeting. And there's a lot here and after the meeting. And in fact, often people talk about assessment being one of the things we want to do after the meeting. We want to poll and learn. And we actually encourage people to do that in the meeting, because you're going to get a lot more rich dialogue. You're going to get a lot more, a much higher hit rate if people are giving you the feedback during the meeting. So we really like to end workshops with commitment and feedback. Really, really powerful way to go. And after the meeting, I think is a real opportunity to be reflective, to get really meta about our meeting systems and how we meet, when we meet. It's also a great opportunity to continue the dialogue, to share the story. How do we craft a narrative of what happened? How does the narrative of this project that we're working on, how does it change because of what happened? So thinking about how we document those things, how we move forward. So lots of little nuggets and things around after the meeting tonight.